300. Could distribute.
Yeah.
I think Doug might be getting him.
Good afternoon. My name is Doug Paddock. I'm the chairman of the legislature, and I'd like to welcome you all to our second public presentation for the Yates County Law Enforcement Collaborative. I want to thank all of you here present and those of you that are able to make it on Zoom for attending and participating in this presentation. I will be starting off, and then the sheriff will make a presentation after the introduction, and then we'll get back to questions. But here's the agenda. We'll go over the ground rules, an overview, who will be participating, what the responsibilities are, and especially what we need from you. What's in scope, what success will look like, the next steps, Sheriff Spike's presentation, and then questions and comments. I'd ask you all to abide by these ground rules, respecting opinions, staying on topic, providing examples, respectful of people's time as well as their opinions, and then questions and comments will be taken at the end. If for those of you that are on Zoom, you can enter questions in the chat box, and our IT director, Tim Groth, will then present them at the end. And I'd like to also thank Tim for arranging these meetings and helping us with the Zoom connections as well as the audio and visual in the chambers. I would ask those, and I'll repeat these when we go to the questions, but I would also ask you to identify if you were a county resident and or property owner. You may state your name if you wish, but that's not mandatory. And we will do all of the questions at the end of the presentation. Probably we will do the Zoom questions first and then take questions from those that are here in attendance. Governor's Executive Order 203 was issued back in June. It requires the chief executive, or in this case, the chief elected of the local government, to work with the local police department, in this case, the sheriff's office, and stakeholders in the community to develop a plan. And all legislative bodies shall ratify that by April 1st or risk losing state funding. And then executive order requires that we consult with stakeholders. You can see that those are listed here. Members of the local police force, in this case the sheriff's department, members of the community, nonprofit, the office of the district attorney, the office of the public defender, and other local elected officials. And I see at least one local elected official in the audience, and I thank you for coming. The reform plan specifies 15 different areas that must be looked at and must be evaluated and addressed. I'm not going to read those all to you, but they are here on the slide. I also said earlier that not adopting a plan by April 1st could subject Yates County to not receiving state funding. Here is a summary of the funding that comes from the state of New York for 2019 and 2020. Totals for the Yates County Sheriff Office for 2019 were just over 900,000, 944,000, excuse me, and for 2020 were almost 995,000. If it does in fact affect the entirety of the state aid that comes to Yates County, that is not quite clear. That is not specified in the executive order, and there have been no guidelines issued to date, even though they were supposed to be, by the Division of the Budget and Department of Criminal Justice Services. It would mean In 2019, that would have meant almost an $8 million loss of state funding to Yates County. And in 2020, that would have meant almost a $7 million loss of state aid to Yates County. So it's certainly something that we don't want to ignore. The team members and stakeholder groups are illustrated here. Law enforcement, elected and appointed officials, the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, which I'll talk about a little bit and a little bit more on the next slide, and then general public forums. The members of the law enforcement portion would include the sheriff, the undersheriff, and representatives from the local law enforcement union, which in our case is Council 82. The Criminal Justice Coordinating Council has a number of elected legislators. It has other elected officials such as the sheriff and the district attorney, along with staff from those offices. Other members of the organization, the county organization, and in addition, the chief of the Penn Yan Police Department and the citizens at large, 2 citizens at large. This council has been in place for a couple of years. Its meetings were somewhat suspended during the COVID pandemic, but through Zoom and through other means, that group will ultimately review the plan and make further recommendations. Elected and appointed officials, invitations have been sent to town board and village board members and the clerks of the boards, along with community organizations. Those invitations have been sent to those organizations as well as businesses. So it's hopeful that between these meetings and a survey that I'll talk about in a few minutes, that we will get good public input. So what are the roles and responsibilities? Well, Ron and I have to work together to put together a plan and submit certification to the governor's office. As I said, the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council will represent their individual interests, review the draft plan, and offer comments. Elected officials and other organizations, other stakeholders, we'd appreciate if you would talk up the situation, the fact that a study is being done, that a survey is available, and we'd certainly appreciate input any towards the recommendations, along with members of the general public doing the same. So what do we need from you that have attended this meeting and that are with us on Zoom? Join in the process. Keep an open mind. Look at all sides of the situation. Please give us feedback from you and from anybody else that you might be talking to or contacting with. Encourage other folks to participate and continue to educate yourself, along with looking at what you think would be improvements within the community, within the law enforcement of our community. So in scope, we can look at reforming certain law enforcement practices, interactions, policies, and so on. And this is, as I said, the second of a public forum with invitations that went out to multiple groups. And there will be communications as to the results of what we found. What's out of scope? Folks that choose not to attend, I'm afraid we can't go necessarily drag them into the meeting. Certainly, if state and federal law enforcement is beyond the scope of this this forum. Changes to systems where the county or the sheriff does not have supervisory capabilities, such as the civil service system, the judicial and court system, and so on, would be out of scope. Providing funding, the county legislature, but not necessarily the plan, will be able to address that, and or liability. So what will success look like? Success will look like a plan prepared by the submission deadline, getting input from the entire community, and getting legislative body approval. And the assumptions are that people will have enough time to work on this and will put political differences aside. So the next steps. While we're going through this presentation and as you think about the survey, please look at these questions. What are things that the sheriff provides that are beneficial? What do you think don't need to be provided? What are the top issues that they deal with? And so on. Most of these questions are covered in the survey, but within the survey, there are also opportunities to add comments in your own words. This is the last of the general public meetings that we've announced. That doesn't mean that we won't hold additional ones if necessary, but at this point, this is the last one planned. There was one on Tuesday of last week. That's available on a YouTube channel. Again, Tim Groth was able to record the presentation and then put it up on YouTube. So if you'd like to join in that and review that, that would be great. Cornell Cooperative Extension has put together the survey, and it is available through a link on the Yates County webpage. Excuse me, www.yatescounty.org. There is a link on that, also on the county's Facebook page, and then the link is also displayed there directly. Law enforcement group and jail participants have received surveys. They will also be conducted through Cornell. And the analysis will be prepared by that software that Cornell has. Our target close date for the survey is next Thursday, which is February 4th, and we'd ask you to complete that. At this point, I'll turn the presentation over to Ron, and again, I thank you for attending, and we'll come back after Ron has completed this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Paddock, for the opportunity to, on behalf of the men and women of the Sheriff's Office, to be here today to give this presentation, both via Zoom and for those that are present here in the legislative chambers. Soon as I get my clicker delivered, we'll proceed on from the first slide. There may be questions later when this presentation is done that may be more appropriate for some of the supervisors within the agency to answer. And therefore, I have Under Sheriff Howard Davis with me today, who is really our personnel officer, if you will, and works a lot on administrative issues such as accreditation and policy. I also have the two lieutenants here that deal with the law enforcement operations, Lieutenant Ed Nemitz, who deals with the uniform patrol deputies supervision, and Lieutenant Scott Becker, who deals with the criminal investigation side of the house. So they are here with me as well. So we'll get started here. Just to talk a little bit about the purpose of this collaboration, one of the things that I'll spend some time on today is to review community needs served by the police agency and go over what our established practices are and some of our current policies. Some of the services that we do provide, many of them individuals may not even be aware of that we do provide such a thing. And try to update any policies that might be recommended to meet this review, offer plans for public comment, and again, as Mr. Paddock said, April 1st, 2021 is the date that they have to file a certification. On the left column on the screen is kind of a breakdown of a table of contents of this presentation. We're going to talk about the county law. We'll talk about our mission and code of ethics, different affiliations, our organizational chart, the accreditation achievement that we have, budget, the collective bargaining, oath of office, duties, and crime statistics, arrest statistics, how we deal with personnel complaints, how we deal with mental health issues, officer wellness, and those types of things. And then halfway through, as we wind down the presentation, we'll address these issues that the reform plan says we must address. The fact that we're accredited and we do a lot of our training and our operations policies are already in place that cover a lot of these issues because of that accreditation status. So we'll go over how we address each one of these and a couple of them, what we plan on doing in the future and et cetera, as we go down that list. Again, some of the main ones that we're looking at, like the implicit bias, procedural justice, the diversion programs, the focused deterrence and model policies, and some of the statewide regulations. So we'll address those issues today. Yates County does not have a police department, if you will. These services are provided in this county by the Office of Sheriff. This is a countywide elected autonomous position, if you will. When the county was first formed in 1823, there were two offices that were established first, the county clerk and the sheriff. And that's how county government started in New York in this county. And there's a myriad of duties for this sheriff's office. Many of the sheriff's offices in the state do not do the duties that this sheriff's office does when it comes to the different segments. Not only operate police services, we also manage the county jail. We oversee the 911 communications, the public safety radio and tower communications part. We provide court security services. We serve and execute civil processes from the courts. We oversee animal control. We oversee the Stop DWI program and the traffic safety program. And also administratively, we do the budget for the coroners. So that's kind of a wide array of issues that this office deals with. The New York State County Law 650 is the kind of the governing section on one of the main duties of the Office of Sheriff is to be the conservator of the peace within the county and perform additional duties or related duties as prescribed by the law. The state, there are many state laws, and there in 40 of those state laws, within 68 sections, the word sheriff appears. So there's a myriad of duties that we're responsible for. We have a mission statement which covers the various main bureaus within the agency, and we start right out with that county law charge that we, as conservatives of the peace and public safety, we're going to try to deliver effective and responsive law enforcement, corrections, court security, civil, and emergency communication services. We want to do it equally and fairly, without regard to race, creed, ethnicity, or one's economic standing. And we value the exchange of ideas with all persons, groups, and entities in order to deploy our resources efficiently and what's good for the community. So we have a lot of interaction with a lot of agencies within the community, both public agencies and private agencies, in order to carry out our mission. And of course, our objective is always to make Yates County a safe place. We also have a code of ethics that we recognize. We know that the public puts a special trust and confidence in us, and I often think about one of my presidential heroes, which is Grover Cleveland, who said a public office is a public trust, and so the public must be able to trust the operations and so forth. And so we abide by a set of management policies, try to treat others humanely and fairly. We have our our funds that we are involved with, not only our civil side, but our evidentiary funds, our other money types of funds are all audited annually. We have the Office of the Treasurer send the auditor over and count monies and such things just to stay accountable. And there again, we want to execute our resources efficiently, hire and promote according to accepted standards, and train. We do a lot of training. We think that's very important. It's a never, the laws are always changing. Science is changing, technology is changing, and all those types of things affect our training. And so, and we encourage others in the profession to abide by the code as well. What do we value? My most important thing that I value is the employees themselves. And I've always pledged to improve our services through continuing training and being accountable. We value human life and dignity. We want to uphold people's rights. We value concepts of community policing and promote education and prevention programs. We do a lot of crime prevention type of programs. And we value those partnerships. Some of the connections with the community, the next few slides, we'll talk about those connections. We put out an annual report which covers an awful lot of information and statistical information regarding not only crime, but the activities of different divisions within the agency every year. We're dealing with the media all the time. We're putting on public presentations. We have down in the lower right, you'll see the students stickered the school resource officer's car there on a I don't know, the school resource officer is a valuable asset to the Dundee School, and they get along with him very well. We have tours of the public safety building and different other, the jail and what have you. Further, the agency has an app which is available on either of the app stores that are out there. If whether you have Apple or Android, it's available. And again, our app will interact with a Facebook page and a Twitter account for getting information out to social media. We do have a web page off the county's website, and we also operate a program called Nixle. And Nixle allows us to put out community notifications, especially to let the community know if, say, a road's closed or there's some emergency that's going on or something we think the community should know about. We also have a program that we can have text alerts sent to us anonymously and that type of thing. And that's another important program. Our dispatch also operates what's called a reverse 911. It's technically called HyperReach, where we can outbound calls to certain phones or certain geographic area to wireline phones, or iPause, which is a system that allows us to outbound a message onto anybody's cellular phone that's connected to a tower within Yates County at any time, and at no cost to them. We can put out an emergency message. Again, on a daily basis, we do press releases to the local media. We have that text alert that I was telling you about here, that on anonymous crime tips. It's used fairly regularly. You can text a tip in, or you can phone a tip in on our phone line 536-5558, and we then, depending upon what the crime tip is or issue is, we'll send the closest police unit to whatever the issue is. And there again, you got the Penn Yan Police Department. We dispatch our sheriff's deputies and the state police all go through our dispatch services. All of our patrol cars and our deputies are trained in how to administer naloxone, or Narcan as it's commonly called. Every police car in the county are equipped that way. In fact, our 911 got a phone message this morning about 11 o'clock of an OD here in the Penn Yan, and we sent the Penn Yan police, and they got there before the EMS got there, and they administered 2 doses of Narcan to revive the individual, which had a heroin overdose. And so we get involved with administering that application quite often. We're a rural county, and sometimes the deputy is closer than the EMS, and a lot of times we assist each other with that. So we have a great relationship with the volunteer ambulance corps. We also have other connections with the community. We put out weather advisories. We deal with the Victims Impact Board. We try to make alerts when there's scams going on, especially for our senior citizens with frauds. There's one of our fastest rising crimes that we deal with is ID theft and that type of thing. I don't think there's a week that goes by that we don't get 3 or 4 different calls from people. And we've had some individuals that have really been taken and have sent money out of the country and everything else. It's really a serious issue right now with cybercrime. Our SWEEP program, which is in the middle there, it stands for Sheriff's Weekend Alternative Program. It's an alternative to incarceration is what it is. And so individuals that are given an intermittent sentence to jail, we can, instead of housing them, we take them out and do community work details for government, for town municipalities, or government-owned, publicly owned, say, cemeteries, roadside cleanup, or non-for-profits. We can also do work for. And so right now that program has been suspended now for several months because of the COVID pandemic, and the courts suspended it. So we're not currently doing it, but it has been very much available in the past. We do a lot of talk about slow-moving vehicle safety with our agricultural community and our Mennonite community, Old Order Mennonite community, and talk about slow-moving vehicle safety with the slow-moving vehicle emblem, and as it relates to that traffic that goes less than 25 miles an hour and that type of thing. So we try to make a lot of awareness about that, and we have a great relationship with the farm agricultural community as well as with the Mennonite community. They actually have allowed us to talk about bicycle safety within their schools, 18 out of 23 schools. Firearms safety with our local SCOPE chapter. We've done mutual firearms training classes for individuals that are thinking about getting a pistol permit. We talk about the revolver and automatic weapons and safety therein. We've got a canine that we do. We have 2 canines, and we do demos periodically and a lot of training. One of our people is an instructor for the region. We put on displays at the county fair. The child passenger safety seat program. We have trained deputies that are technicians that can teach people how to install these child passenger safety seats, which are not an easy thing sometimes. Some of them are difficult to have the right attachments and understand how to put a child in safely so there be no issues. But we also take donations from that, and the Walmart in Geneva, as an example, donated us a lot of brand new seats. And so if you're indigent, we actually give people seats for free. Active shooter training, we've done a lot of that with, it's like a rebellion-based training type of thing that we put on for public and workplace violence, and we've done a lot of it with local churches. We've got the drug take-back program that we administer. We've got receptacles not only at the public safety building, but we've got them at the Dundee-Starkey offices and the Village of Rushville offices. When they're open, people can drop off unused pills and types of drugs that way, so we can destroy them. Better for the environment and better for crime prevention as well, so they're not stolen or misused. We also do an annual, twice a year, biannual event, April and October, with the DEA, where we actually, some people are untrusting of this type of taking back of drugs, so they want to give them to us in person, and we have that behind the courthouse twice a year from 10 to 2. It works out very well. Some of the other programs that we have trained our people on, our deputy sheriffs trained in what's called A-RIDE, and that's roadside impaired driving enforcement. We take driving while intoxicated very seriously. It's kind of a zero tolerance thing with that. We're concerned about drugs, not only alcohol in driving, but drugs in driving. And it's very concerning. Our canine dogs are certified to detect drugs on a search if they're hidden in a vehicle. We just a couple of weeks ago we found a stash of drugs inside a compartment of a car on an arrest. We've got a fully trained drug recognition expert. They call them DREs. He's the only one in Yates County of all the police in Yates County, including the state, that has got that recognition and training, and he can detect if you're impaired by drugs. And so, and then at the county jail, just to understand, we have a relationship with FLACRA and substance abuse counseling, and we're involved with a peer program that can counsel inmates with a drug problem. And we've also, with a relationship with the public health, we can issue Vivitrol on someone getting out of jail, which will really help with the opioid addiction. Because Yates County has 65 miles of shoreline with the three of the Finger Lakes, Canandaigua, Keuka, and Seneca Lakes, with that 65 miles, we end up patrolling these waters, especially in the summertime, June, July, August especially. And we have a lot of recreational users. And so we put on boating safety courses and programs to wear the PFD. We have a zero tolerance with PFD enforcement as well. That's something we think is very vital that people wear and not ignore. And we also have not only patrol boats on the lakes. The patrol boats actually belong to the state of New York. They're on loan to us, so they didn't cost our taxpayers any money. And we operate those boats. And then we've also got the jet skis. Sometimes it takes one to catch one. It seems to be what happens in that regard. But it's been we've been very successful in a lot of prevention of our boating accidents and issues like that. Some of the further connections, we put up billboards from time to time. One of the most recent billboards is upper left corner there on sharing the road. There we have emphasized how we need to share the road with farm equipment, farm tractors, ag equipment, combines, bicycles, and with horse and buggies, which we see 80% of these types of collisions are from unsafe speeds, and they strike them from behind. And so we've tried to promote an awareness of that. We actually, that billboard down below with the two deputies with the car talking about driving while drugs, we actually received a recognition of excellence award from the Governor's Traffic Safety Committee for that particular billboard that was put up on addressing that issue. We were one of the first agencies to address driving while in the ability impaired by drugs in the state. So it was nice of them to recognize our efforts. The Yellow Dot program, lower right, is a program that we have available that if you've got some emergency information, that if you were involved in a traffic collision and couldn't speak, or you're unconscious or whatever, that emergency responders need to know about, if you put the yellow dot on your back window, we know right then to look in your glove box to find out what your information that we need to know is. Another one of those services we provide. The New York State Sheriffs operate a summer camp. They've done so for a good many years. For several of those years, it's been on Keuka Lake, still is. It's the old Camp Iroquois up on East Bluff Drive. And every year, Yates County sends 11 or 12 of our young people to that camp. Our youth officer deals with that program. Actually, we talk about partnerships. We have a relationship with all school nurses, and not only the Marcus Whitman School District, but the Dundee School District and the Penn Yan School District, where we use those nurses along with the youth officer to determine what students might benefit from a camp experience for 1 week in the summer. It's been a very successful program. Some other the associations that we affiliate with, not only the New York State Sheriff's Association, but Institute, but the National Sheriff's Association, the New York State Stop DBI, The Yates Substance Abuse Coalition. We tend that it's been very successful in getting out a lot of awareness and different training on this drug problem. We started that back in like 2014. The Finger Lakes Law Enforcement Academy, which is basically it's operated out of 7 counties in the region in New York, Finger Lakes region. Most of it comes right out of in Canandaigua as a central location, but that's where we send our folks for a lot of the training. We have a good relationship with the Cuca Lake Association for safety on Cuca Lake and the waters. We do annual presentations to that group and public presentations and take questions from them. Great relationship. They care a lot about the lake, and we do too. Clifton Springs Hospital and Clinic is one of our newer relationships where we now take all our mentally ill, mental people that need mental health. Those are very concerning issues that we do these transports to the Clifton Springs Hospital for that treatment. So far this week, we've taken, I think it's 2, or I think we did 1 this morning. I think 3 trips already this week to Clifton with individuals from our county that we had to take into custody that needed this type of help. We're glad to have that relationship. We deal a lot with George Rotes, who's the community services director, who helps us a lot with those types of problems. The National Child Safety Council helps through donations from local businesses that help us provide safety material to K through 6th grades in the school, and we appreciate that relationship. The International Association of Chiefs of Police, we use some of their policies, model policies, to help us in policy development. The New York State Association of Counties, we've had a good relationship with them, especially their Public Safety Committee. And then Project Lifesaver is a relationship we have with the Office of the Aging. I guess it's now ProAct, it's Ben Yates, where some individuals that may want to wander from homes can have a device on that. We have the ability to track that device, and so we have a mutual agreement with them to work on that. This is the agency organizational chart, and basically the 3 purple things. The one on the left is the Corrections Bureau, which is the jail side and the court security side of the house. The center is the administrative, and there again you've got records and civil and budget and 911 communications come from that, and other support services and programs. And then the one on the right is the Law Enforcement Bureau, where your Road Patrol Division and Criminal Enforcement Division is. And I want to concentrate on that one. And you can see the breakdown of the sergeants, patrol deputies, Marine Patrol officers, that type of thing. The Animal Control Officer would come under that for oversight. Juvenile for the youth officer, school resource officer, the Criminal Investigation Division regarding criminal and fraud and narcotics and cybercrime and public assistance fraud, where we have a relationship and agreement with the Yates County DSS to deal with that. Crime scene technician work and evidence processing and what have you. And then we have special services that I mentioned before. We have an underwater dive team, search and recovery team, in case we have to recover a body or recover evidence that's in the water, and firearms training, accident, collision reconstruction from traffic collisions. If any serious accident that's on a county road or a fatality anywhere in the county, we call that unit out to do extensive reconstruction and to document that scene very completely. So, and some of the other units that come under that. Let me go back one. We have 3 collective bargaining agreements with one with the corrections and other employees, the deputy sheriff's unit, which is the one that involving the police, and then the emergency communications unit. The deputies' contract doesn't expire until 2024. The other ones, although they say 21 on here, they actually were extended another year to 2022. Whenever we hire a police officer, county police officer, deputy sheriff, then they're required to take an oath of office, and we have to file that oath with the Yates County Clerk's office, and where they swear to support the Constitution and the state of New York and faithfully discharge their duties. That's the oath that everyone is required to take. We have to sign a document. The clerk has to sign a document attesting to the fact that they took an oath and submit that to the state. One of the things that we're supposed to emphasize is the hiring process for a deputy sheriff. The sheriff is considered a co-employer under the law. He's the only officer within the county government that's a co-employer when it comes to the terms and conditions of employment with individuals that work for the office of sheriff. And so we work through the Yates County Civil Service Office. There's age issues. There's a testing that has to take place. There's physical fitness testing required. There's minimum requirements for running and push-ups and sit-ups, that type of thing. So physical fitness is required to be on that list. We get a list from the civil service folks, personal officer on which has a rule of 3. And so irregardless of what the scores are, once we have 3 of the top scores, as long as there's 3 individuals, they could all be in the top score. That's the list we're stuck with. And so then we do background investigations, and we look for those qualifications. We look for felony convictions, that type of thing that would bar you from employment as a police officer. We have a sergeant's committee and supervisor committee that do interviews, do more formal backgrounds, interview character references. We often make contingent offers of employment. They have to pass a workers' comp physical. There's a minimum eyesight requirement. There's a minimum hearing requirement. There's a psychological assessment that has to be done. Fingerprinting and criminal history, all a part of it, as well as we also do a polygraph examination to make sure that everything in the background is verified. They do a 28-week academy. And if they fail academically, fail physically, or fail in firearms proficiency, then they're out. And so it's that strict. They're assigned to a field training officer for about 12 weeks before they get to go on their own. So generally, in this Finger Lakes area, they start to attend basic school February 1st, thereabout. And then we really don't see them as an asset, as a resource on the road patrol until probably the end of September or 1st of October. So, and then they're on a 78-week probationary period. And that training is done, as I said, the training is done through the Finger Lakes Law Enforcement Academy. The academy is 1,067 hours. And so it takes up a good part of the year. Through the accreditation, we have to maintain 21 hours of annual training at minimum on different various required topics. So that's all important. When it comes to firearms, we raise the bar. The state says 70% is okay. We've raised the bar to 80%, and we stick to it. So we require a higher proficiency. Just as an example of some training examples, one of the things I wanted to point out, I just grabbed one of the deputies, Deputy McGuigan on the left, and one of the sergeants, Sergeant Ryan on the right, just to give you an example in 2019 of some of the courses and hours that they took as a member of the the Underwater Search and Rescue Team. He had some dive training, search and seizure training. There again, the legal issues and the mental health first aid. Those are the types of things that, so he had 112 hours, well beyond the 21 that's minimum required. And the sergeant was involved in several different things, the TASER 7 basic course, crisis intervention, that type of thing. Again, legal issues, terrorism, awareness, and those types of procedures. So again, 103 hours there. We most recently, this fall, we did what's called George Floyd training. And it was all about use of force, de-escalation, and bias in policing. All the members of the agency go through this Yates County Skill Up training, kind of an annual thing on workplace harassment, employees' right to know, bloodborne pathogens, fire safety, that type of thing. It's required of county employment. The patrol zones in the county, this is how we divide the county up. Oftentimes, we normally, it seems that minimum we need to have three patrols on duty. We always hope to get at least a trooper from the state police to help us as well, and to try to minimally cover things. So we got various zones, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then there's a central zone that sometimes we have to, based upon the number of complaints that come in, the central zone seems to have the majority of the complaints, or zone 4. We tend to try to emphasize to have someone right in those areas based upon the way the complaints come in. As far as criminal arrest goes, so this is one of the more important slides up here for 2019. There was, as you can see, the breakdown. There were 410 criminal arrests, 295 male and 115 female. And you can see the breakdown of the race, 382 white, 385 white, and 24 black. So you can see that we then decided that we needed to break down whether the black was a Yates County resident or not, and how that breaks down, as 9 were and 15 were non-Yates County residents that would have come into Yates County to be involved in an allegation of crime. We have ethnicity, non-Hispanic was 400, Hispanic was 10. So you can see the breakdown. On the right over there in the blue, you can see the last census, and you can see the breakdown of the male, female, and the population, and how the census breaks down the white, black, Hispanic, and other population. And so there, if you collate those numbers, it's certainly not an outstanding number to be arresting folks of color. That it's not out of sync. And the bottom there is traffic stops and traffic citations and how that compares. So we stopped 3,928 cars in a traffic stop, and we end up issuing tickets 982. So what we're trying to say there is not everybody we stop gets a ticket. Only about 25% do. Sometimes a warning is enough, or we're just trying to check to make sure that someone's okay. They might have weaved out of a lane or something, and we're concerned they were driving while intoxicated, but they just, they were something interrupted them, or they were adjusting the dial on the radio or something, and who knows. But that's why we check those things out. So one of the things that makes it challenging for us is our population. Generally, we feel can double sometimes, especially on weekends in the summertime. We know at least goes up to between 30 and 35,000 easily. Sometimes, based upon the number of calls that we get. We operate during a summer like a community that has about 10,000 more population than what the Census Bureau says we have. So we have a lot of transient population, or you have a lot of population that have summer homes that live here in the summer but don't count this as their resident. So those are all issues that we need to be aware of. On the training, or excuse me, not on training, on calls for services and statistics. Again, there's a lot up there, but just to point out a couple, the activation of the K9 was 162 times. We answered business alarms and residential alarms, 109 business alarms and 151 residential alarms. 522 animal dog type of complaints were handled. 140 times we required a backup for officers, and 35 burglaries. We're really, the burglary crime has dropped in the last 5 years. It was double that 5 years ago, if you look at the statistics for Yates County. And so the burglary crime has come down. We're pleased to see that. Domestic violence, however, remains high. That's at 226 for the year. And most of those calls require 2 officers to respond to them, and so forth. FOIL requests is a big one, where an outside entity would be requesting a copy of a report or a record. And that happened 990 times we had requests for records. Fraud cases, we had 82 fraud cases, and we had welfare fraud cases, 148, and juvenile complaints, 55, and larceny was 77. Going to the next page, whoops. Going to the next page, the highlights there. Again, I talked about mentally ill persons. We had 69, or almost 70 of them there in 2019. 310 car deer accidents that we investigated where cars collided with deer, and 97 accidents, motor vehicle collisions were with injury, 352 with just property damage only. Navigation type of complaints on the lakes, there were 152 of those, and some other miscellaneous stops there. We did 183 pistol permit background checks, and then property lost was 126 reports. Suspicious incidents was almost 200 suspicious incidents called into us of either an incident, a person, or a vehicle, and so forth. So that's some of the highlights of that. Vehicles speeding and reckless operation, where people were complaining they wanted more done about it. We had over 200 of those. So it's just an example of some of the calls and the services that we received. The personnel complaint issue is there's a form if someone wants to make a personnel complaint. We try to have great transparency on this type of issue. There's nothing to hide here. And so we had a couple of them in 2019. We had one in 2020. An official personnel complaint has to be signed to have an official personnel complaint as to what the complaint is. On the ones in 2019, on one case, we issued a written reprimand. Another case, the case was unsubstantiated. And then the one last year was another reprimand that was issued for that. Basically, it was a case where a supervisor didn't get back to a complainant. That we told him we'd get back to him and tell him what we did, and the deputies did no wrong, but he didn't get back to him. So we expect that to be responsive to people that way. I might add that we're one of the things that have come up was the idea that maybe we needed to have some way for people to say a compliment if they wanted to. So we're working on a form that is in its draft. That'll be a public compliment type of form, along with the public of a complaint form that'll be available on the website that people can then download and file it that way. It'll be easier for the public to either make a complaint or to have a compliment. And now with that disciplinary system that we have in place, we deal with a lot of times with just, verbal counseling, corrective criticism of some policy that we want to make sure is done correctly. A lot of our policies are guidelines. We give our officers a lot of discretion in a lot of ways, and that type of thing. When we actually do a memorandum of counseling, we consider that a training type of memo. And so it's kind of a retraining thing to refer to something, or someone sit down and go over a particular function with somebody. Then if we're going to take official disciplinary action, then we have to go to Section 75 of the Civil Service Law. entitled to an administrative hearing. Some of the various dispositions that can take place is a reprimand, a fine, suspension without pay, transfer, demotion, or actually being terminated. That's an example of how the system works from Section 75 of the Civil Service Law. Mental health crisis handling. Again, I give you the one example of how the frequency of that. If anyone is deemed to ever be an endangerment to themselves or somebody else, then a police officer is duty to take them into custody and take them to the nearest, we call it a 9.39 of the mental hygiene law hospital, and as designated facility. Now, we've deemed that it's in our best interest to take them to Clifton Springs Hospital. And so that's the current policy on that. And so we've tried to do a special training on that. We've been involved in crisis intervention team training. We've got certain officers that can operate a tablet and actually be in communication with a mental health professional from the scene and talk about trying to resolve it that way. But again, look at, I mentioned the 70 cases in 2019, and then in 2020, they rose to 90, so 22%. So our agency being involved in these type of cases, these are all cases outside the village of Penn Yan as well. So these are just in the county. And again, it's normally 2 officers, and there's been a few occasions where it's more than 2 officers to deal with this type of issue, to get people the proper help. A lot of times people stop taking their medication, and that causes issues. And sometimes it's just as simple as getting them back on the right medication. And so de-escalation techniques are very important, and that type of thing. So we continue to try to offer inter-service training on this topic, and we've come a long ways with that. Safety and wellness of our officers. We do have an employee assistance program, which we recommend that our members get involved in for various reasons, whether it be, we work shift work, sometimes sleep is an issue, whether there's a nutrition issue or there's a family in crisis with finances or other different services that are needed, stress, that type of thing. They've been helpful in that ways. I always appreciate the county supporting us with paying us to have a service that provides that specialty service for public safety type of employees as well. And again, we're very concerned about officer suicide, domestic violence, substance abuse, that type of thing. And so you've got to be very aware of safety and wellness for the health of your membership and so forth. So we've got a contract with Bray and Associates for traumatic events. And should there be some traumatic event in the county or some major crisis where EMS or volunteer fire services or police officers are involved or dispatchers are involved, that they'll do a stress debriefing, and it's worked out very well to manage that type of stress. One of the things I want to talk about briefly is some of the equipment. I certainly can't talk about all of our equipment, but besides vehicles, our dispatch center, in the small picture in the middle with the arrows points to a conductive energy device or a taser, which is commonly referred to. We've got brand new ones in that regard, and a body-worn camera. We have brand new body-worn cameras as far as that goes as well. And we have a field unit, tent-like unit that we can assemble if we need to. Again, the deputy's patrol car, the picture in the middle, that's his office, and he's got a laptop computer, he's got a printer, and all that type of services to be in communication with the headquarters. And then the next picture is like one example of one of the equipment that CID has for fingerprinting and doing all sorts of forensic type of evidence gathering. And we have several other boxes I could have taken pictures of. Our Marine Patrol services, our snowmobiles. Each patrol car has gear in it that would be ready for civil disobedience, civil disturbance. These things were all gotten on a grant years ago. Our firearms, each one of our cars has a rifle in it. Several years ago, we found ourselves outgunned at an incident that we had surrounded. The individual had a rifle and we had shotguns, and he could get to us and we couldn't get to him. And so we've switched over to rifles a few years ago, and that's worked out well. We've got a UATV, a drone or a quad as it's called, which we use a lot for accident investigation reconstruction, to take a photograph from up above or get an image from up above of the accident scene. We use it to find marijuana growing in cornfields. We've used it on missing person cases, and we've used it on a couple of occasions where we've had some standoffs and we want to monitor the situation. So other stuff, special services, fire investigation team has a lot of different equipment to gather evidence. Our canine units, our bicycle safety units, our underwater dive team, snowmobile. CERT stands for Corrections Emergency Response Team, which is something in the jail if we have to do a cell extraction. Not everybody in the jail is always cooperative sometimes, so we have issues there, and we have to have people equipped so that they don't get injured, and other inmates don't get injured as well. And we also have an accident investigation unit. That's on the upper right. That's a picture of them down on the bridge on Route 14, setting up the total station, it's called, to take electronic measurements. Our underwater side scan sonar on the left side there, and underwater video camera. Our relationship with the DARE program and Eddie Eagle with scope for firearm safety, and the radar trailer, which is over to the right, which we deploy. Some municipalities ask for us to put that out. Again, our dive team, our UATV is at the bottom there. Off-road vehicle, which we loan out to the highway department every year to put up snow fence. So we've got a partnership and get better use out of that when it's needed, firearms training and so forth. So again, let's turn to that list that I originally showed you in the beginning of everything that the EO 203 guideline requires, and try to address how our current policies, many of our general orders currently already address those issues because of the accreditation standard. Evidence-based policing is one of them. And again, we use those different types of strategies when we are doing policy development, evaluating, and making decisions, especially especially in a policy, as to what's been proven to work. And so, as firearms training is one example on demanding the qualification on what's been proven to work. Different other use of force. Again, we've banned the use of chokeholds and neck restraints by policy. That's evidence-based, that it's not appropriate in most cases, unless a matter of life or death. And then you've got certain crime prevention type of programs. But so we get involved with this with felony traffic stops, search and seizures, and other things are all evidence-based policies. And again, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, or the National Sheriffs, or state associations, DCJS, help us with those types of things to base your policy on. Implicit bias awareness is another one of the issues. I talked about the George Floyd training we've already had, but we feel we could do more in this regard. We don't have a problem in this area. I have had no complaints in this area, but yet it's one of those hot topic issues that we think additional training is important. We've reached out to the US DOJ Community Policing Cops Office, as they're called. We've had one phone conversation with them so far, and we expect to have another one soon on the availability of an instructor to come out and even if it's a regional training, to do some training in this area of bias. And the other resource we're looking at is a professor at Finger Lakes Community College is also willing to help us with that regard. So we're also looking at that. So we see some additional training, and so we're doing some planning on that as we go ahead. Procedural justice is all about fairness in the process to resolve disputes, and again, it's based upon 4 concepts about fairness, giving voice to the other party, some transparency, and being impartial. And if they think it can be lead to positive community relationships, if you will, and if you abide by those 4 pillars or 4 principles, we cover procedural justice in one of our codes of conduct, and so we think that's important. There's a special course coming up in one of the southern tier counties here next month that we've got one of our sergeants who's a certified instructor. We've got him registered to attend that and to become a trainer type of thing on this very topic. And so he'll bring that back and train the rest of the agency. So we think that's good. De-escalation training and practices. There's a lot in the basic police course over the last few years has been improved to address a lot of those things on crisis intervention skills. Professional communications is what they call de-escalation and crisis intervention. So it's an important thing. We've looked at different guidelines on that from a company called Lexapol, from the mental health first aid and the Office of Mental Hygiene, and so forth. And again, the George Floyd training that we had was really good that way. And the members of our CIT team that have been trained, some special training in mental health, have spent a lot of time on this particular topic. Reality-based training is something that we practice. We have one of the lead instructors in this area. I saw early on that this was a topic up and coming a few years ago that we needed to get out in front of, and so Sergeant Frank Ryan, First Sergeant Ryan, is a leading instructor in this area in the Finger Lakes region, and he's even got the ability to teach other agency members to be instructors as well. It's a special training to understand how to do scenario-based learning and set up learn by doing type of thing. And we've used it on addressing mental health emergencies, vehicle stops, dealing with providing medical care, life emergency situations, and generally dealing with people in crisis, and trying to reduce confrontations between the officer and the and who they're dealing with, if we can. So it's that type of thing where we put officers in particular situations where they've got to show us that they understand decision making and what have you. There's something called LEAD. It came out of Washington State. It stands for Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion Programs. And again, under the police reform, they want law enforcement to try to take on diversion programs if you can. One of the problems with diversion programs is not every police agency is set up to really operate a lot of those. It can be an unfunded state mandate as well. We feel that we comply with this because of our relationship with FLACRA and the CODI program, and dealing with individuals that are into peer counseling as far as drug addiction. Drug court, we think, is a diversion. We've got alternatives to incarceration programs, which we think is a diversion. The drug take back, obviously, is a prevention program. The district attorney has a traffic diversion program now that we participate in, and the Youth Explorer type of program, and the Center for Dispute Settlement settle something civilly instead of making an arrest. So we think we're covered that very well. Restorative justice is one of the hot issues that the reform calls for. Actually, you hear about this all across the country, and it's you know, it's if you're faced with some issue where it's kind of a minor disorder or a nuisance type of complaint, can the officer use discretion? Can they negotiate or persuade others in a conflict resolution to resolve the problem? Can it be problem-oriented policing? Can there be a way to settle it without somebody getting arrested? If you can, then it helps with community relationships. A lot of times, law enforcement in bigger cities get themselves in trouble looking at something in black and white. And sometimes you've got to look at these things. I grew up. My father was in the law enforcement, and one of the things he told me is he says there can be justice without bars. And when you think about that, what he was saying is there is a way that sometimes maybe a warning or some kind of a negotiated compromise might be just a ticket to solve the problem, and somebody doesn't have to be arrested and put in jail. And it comes down to that story where I've always said that a police officer, a deputy sheriff, wears two hats. He's both a peace officer and a police officer. And you got to know which hat to put on and when to put it on. Sometimes you've got to enforce the law, and that's the way it is. Other times, maybe you can use this restorative justice model and strike a balance using discretion to settle a problem in a way that doesn't get the criminal justice involved. Community-based outreach and conflict resolution. We've got a LE as a law enforcement 1097. That's one of our policy numbers on community relations. And so we try to attend special meetings or town boards, address matters of conflict and that type of thing. I've told several municipalities if they would like us to attend, we'd be glad to do that. I'm glad to send a lieutenant or a member of the agency out to talk to boards. I've gone out there for a long time. Every year I went out to town board meetings, and still do to try to make sure that there's no issues or anything they need to tell us. We've got the coalition. We've got the Cuca Park Association, which is like a neighborhood watch, if you will, and we meet with them. We've met with them a couple of 3 times on issues involving the Cuca College campus area and the residents of the Cuca Park, and the Cuca Lake Association, schools, Council of Churches, and the takebacks, that type of thing. We're dealing with all the pause forward complaints come through the county attorney in my office. I get them all. We have to decide what's the best way to deal with those, whether to send a pause forward complaint is New York State is on pause as far as COVID goes. And most of them allege no mask or some public health law violation. And we've actually filed 2 charges in that regard so far, and issued a lot of warnings, a lot of counseling. You talk about restorative justice, where we've gone out and tried to educate on what the law is and the community safety of public health. There again, and dealing with persons with disabilities has been a big part of the basic course for police that's been added to it, especially dealing with people on autism. So officers are trained in that now. Problem-oriented policing, hotspots. Again, we participate in community projects. We've done some special traffic enforcement programs, STEP. We've done road patrol sobriety checkpoints, that type of thing. We've tried to. We've had cases where we've had houses broken into on Sundays, and they're targeting a particular group where people are in church. So then we try to put out patrols or unmarked cars in that area to try to catch who's doing that type of thing. We have made arrests on that in the past. Undercover work, underage alcohol, dark house checks. That's another service that we offer. We've offered it for years, where you can either post your house or not. That if you tell us you're going to be away to Florida for all the winter, then our patrols, when they're in that area, will stop and make sure that everything is okay. That's one of those services that we've provided. The radar speed trailer, that type of thing. We just got a grant from the Governor's Traffic Safety Committee on it's called Police Traffic Services Grant, PTS. And it doesn't kick in until October 1st. We just had to apply for it and use statistical information where we broke down which state highway in our county had the most collisions, 14A did, and which county road had the most collisions, Preemption Road did. And so we will be concentrating with overtime from this grant to increase our patrols in those two areas later this year. Focused deterrence, again, with this bail reform and discovery reform that came out a year ago, it's been kind of difficult to come up with some of these strategies on crime reduction. We would like to express the point that substance abuse and DWI and drug court are all part of our way to try to deter crime. The relationship with FLACRA, Council of Alcoholism, that has counseling with all of our people that have been involved in DWI. Again, our victims impact panel where all the offenders have to appear. Jail parenting class is something that we think reduces domestic violence. We got the DARE program in both Dundee and Marcus Whitman schools. School offender registration. Our agency is the sex offender registry for the County of Yates. And we allow the Village of Penn Yan Police to come off of our registry and maintain their own, although we have the master file. And so we do notifications through a program called Offender Watch, where if you want to know if somebody is a sex offender that lives within your proximity of your residence, you can register to be notified. Right now, we currently are monitoring 95 sex offenders in Yates County. Crime prevention through environmental design, referring back to community relations. We have a policy called LE 1097. And again, we can conduct security checks of a business. We can suggest how you could redesign, or how to put on a better lock on your door, where lighting should be, trees, bushes, that type of thing. Alarm systems, recommendation, you should go out and install something differently. Whether your parking lot or whether your environment is conducive to crime, that type of thing. Once in a while, I periodically get notified by a planning board that's looking at a housing project, and they want to know about security lighting. They want to know about traffic flow, egress, that type of thing, and we comment on that. There again, all about public and private building design, workplace violence, what we can do to prevent that type of thing. Violence prevention and reduction interventions. Again, we've got the school resource program, Dundee School, with a DARE program, drug abuse resistance education, what that stands for. Support from school districts, incident response, courthouse, county office building. We've done workplace violence training, that type of thing. We've worked with Cuca College on safety plans, security relationship we have with their security department is very good. We even allow Cuca College security to have a place on our 911 advisory board. Anger management, domestic violence initiatives, and active shooter training, which the last class we did was one of the local churches on active shooter. Okay, and then winding down here on the Municipal Police Training Council is all governor appointees. They work with the DCJS law enforcement program, and we continue to be accredited. We've been so since 2005. We were just reaccredited this past December, and so every 5 years we have to go through some really strict scrutiny to make sure we walk the talk. The model policies that we use from the state, all of our policies are based off these types of things. On our body worn camera policy, the ID procedures, the hate crimes, how we investigate domestic violence, our license plate readers that we have, if we were to have some kind of a shooting, the way we do psychological exams, the tasers, conductive energy devices, as I said, how we take sexual assault evidence, how that's all done. All those policies are based upon those state model policies. The most important one that gets changed and you have to stay up on is use of force. And like I said, they just, by legislation, did away with the chokehold type of thing. So recording custodial interrogations and all that is all according to those 17 state policies. Now, there were several laws changed in 2020. The one was the Anti-Chokehold Act, which I've talked about. So we've got a new directive that covers that. There's another one about civil action and summoning a police officer for no reason at all. And we've got policies that cover that. We've got the civil rights law to address the idea that a police officer can't stop someone from videotaping them out there in the public. And so we've got a policy that addresses that. If we discharge a weapon or any use of force, then we've got policies that direct on how we have to report that to the state of New York, and documentation of that and some record reports. The responding to mental and medical health needs of somebody in custody. If you've got somebody under arrest or in your jail or whatever, they're in custody, then you've got your duty bound by law to provide certain needs. And so we've got a policy that addresses that. The law enforcement misconduct, there again, we've got a duty for, say you've got 4 officers involved in something and one of them does something that's not according to policy, then we've got this duty to intercede. We get this duty to stop, a duty to report. We've got policies on that type of thing. The body-worn camera program was a new law that the state said that the state police, who have never had them before, have got to implement a camera program. We started out with body cameras in 2014. They did not hold up to the rigors of the job, and so we just issued all new ones here on a 5-year payback program that we're involved in, and they're all very rugged and very, very, very good. And so we've got that all in place. And so if we're making an arrest, then we'll have to provide that on the discovery reform laws. We'll have to provide that to the defense on that. The FOIL exemption, Freedom of Information Law exemptions now involved in police records. There used to be something called 50A of the Civil Rights Law that said that no police officer or correction officer's personnel file could be viewed by anyone unless by permission of the officer or by court order. That was repealed. And so now it comes under the Freedom of Information Law. So if someone files that, then we have to provide the personnel record. Some of the contemporary issues that we get involved in, we've got a 45-year-old public safety building that from time to time has issues. We've got the criminal justice reform, which has been very challenging to keep up with all of that. Again, use of force is ever a moving fluid issue. Illegal drugs, we're dealing with those still. Mental health problems, again, those numbers keep going up. Issues with civil service on the rule of 3. I would love to see them from a 5-point band score to increase it to 10-point band so we could have more eligible candidates to look at. This is a tough business nowadays to recruit and retain members. Our mission statement, and again, the unsafe speed issues are causing a lot of our collisions, car deer collisions, and slow-moving vehicles, what have you, are some of the more contemporary things we deal with. And this is just before the last of the slides. I just thought I'm a great person of history, and I thought this was interesting. Bill Bratton, who was the former commissioner of New York City, put this out here not too long ago. It was Sir Robert Peel's 9 Principles of Policing, 1829. And when you go down through that list, we talk about restorative justice, we talk about procedural justice, all those types of things. They were talking about it even back then. And I think it's interesting to look at that, the relationship between the law enforcement and the public. Now, what have we done since this whole thing was issued last year? Again, I've worked with the board chair. We've participated in different, I actually spoke to the New York State Chiefs of Police on some training topics. We've got this PowerPoint we put together. We've presented to the CJCC. We've updated our use of force policy. We've done some in-service training. We're doing more policy development on the new legislation. Issued and trained on the body cameras and on the tasers. We've got a sergeant registered to be a trainer in procedural justice. We've developed an agency creed, which we're getting ready to put out, that talks about to have a guardian mindset more so than a warrior mindset. And again, that talks about police officer, peace officer, and community relationships. We've issued a new, we've got it, I think it's ready to go out. We've got it all done on a policy called fairness and equity. And what that talks about is it prompts the Yates County employees from engaging in bias-based behavior. It provides guidelines to assist employees in identifying this bias, fair treatment of others, procedural justice concepts, and preventing and responding to certain incidents, and all about personal complaints and anti-discrimination and harassment policies, that type of thing. We wanted to codify all those issues, and so that's something that we've worked on since this all came out. We've done letters to municipalities with survey questions. I've gotten 2 back, one from the village of Rushville and one from the town of Benton so far. Good feedback from them. And the counties, Chairman Paddock and the CJCC and their surveys, not only surveys to law enforcement, surveys to the community, and surveys to inmates at the jail. And we do see ourselves as a community partner. And so that concludes my presentation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Sheriff. We'll now take questions from the folks on Zoom, and then move on to questions from the folks here in the audience. Tim Groth, our Director of Information Technology, has the questions.
Okay. So we have 2 questions, both from the same person. The first one is thank you for the thorough overview of the Sheriff's Office responsibilities, training, and procedures. You do a lot. This week, the National Sheriff's Association President David Mahoney was quoted in the Washington Post saying that many police leaders have treated officers with extremist beliefs as outliers and have underestimated the damage they can inflict on the profession and the nation. What is your response to that statement, and what is your policy on officers holding extremist beliefs?
Well, we appreciate that question. It comes down to leadership of a law enforcement agencies, quite frankly. And that leadership is not only comes from the top, but that leadership also comes from the various division supervisors that are involved with oversight of our deputy sheriffs. It's very important that on some of the concepts that we just talked about, especially that last policy that I referred to called fairness and equity, that we take this again, this mindset that we need to be thinking that we're more of a guardian than we are as a warrior. And if you're going to have a warrior attitude and you go to some extremist attitude, then is the public going to be treated fairly or not? And it's a very important to all of us, myself and the supervisors and the agencies, that we treat people fairly. And so we try to be very transparent. We try to be very accountable. And it just sickens me when I first saw that issue out in Minnesota with George Floyd. I was literally sick. as a law enforcement, I'd like to think of myself as a professional, and many others in the agency, they were just sick to see that type of issue. And so we try to be very transparent, and we're not perfect. Do we make mistakes? Yes, but we correct them. And again, I go back to a statement that I make often, that a public office is a public trust. And so I think that's important. And I hope that the statement that Sheriff Mahoney made was certainly dealt with very few in this profession. I do not see the Yates County Sheriff's Office that way. Thank you.
Excuse me, Sheriff, you mentioned your equity and fairness policy, and I think when you were talking about it, you may have mentioned that there wasn't, that there was something in there that dealt with what Heather referred to as extremist beliefs, but joining of organizations.
Well, we certainly don't condone anything like that. Those types of organizations. I don't know of anyone in our agency that has anything to do with an extremist organization that I'm aware of.
Okay. And secondly, also from Heather, and by the way, I did ask Heather if she was a property owner in Yates County and a resident, and both questions are yes. Her second question was, what is the residency rate of white people arrested in Yates County in 2019?
Well, the one slide did depict that ratio. I don't know whether we can we go back to that slide. It might be best to go back to that because we tried to break down the race of the arrests and how that breaks down. It looks like the question involves whites, the way it looks. Well, let's go back to that slide, and we can better answer that for Heather.
It may be that you broke out for the African American and Black community, how many were Yates County residents and how many were not. I think the question may very well be that what are the same numbers for those that were white or classified as white? You may have to do some research on that.
Yeah, I certainly can do that research. The question had come up in some of the early presentation, especially to the CJCC group, that we ought to break down because the blacks within the population of Yates County was 0.9% of 1%. It was very low, so they wanted me to break down that ratio. I can, through our statistical information, go back and break it down for the white in Yates County and out of Yates County. I will do that. Good observation, Heather. Thank you.
Okay. And our next question. Comes from Jim Moon. Yates County Sheriff's Department does a great job. How does our pay schedule compare to areas like Seneca, Ontario, Schuyler, and Steuben County?
Well, we're kind of in the middle, from what I understand. Let me ask one of my people here. Does any one of you want to address that issue? Scott? Lieutenant Backer will answer that, Jim.
Yes, we're in the middle. Counties like Seneca County, we're higher of, but like Ontario County, it's less pay. The biggest problem we have is counties up in near Monroe County. We've lost quite a few officers to the towns and county up there because of the pay is so much higher in that area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And next question, also from Jim, or I'm sorry, Jim was just saying that, yes, he is also a county resident and property owner. And then from Jacqueline, as a Yates County resident and property owner, I commend your department. As a member of Yates County Community Services Board, I thank you for the work you do with our clientele and for listening to the input from our committee. And that was more of just a comment than a question.
Yes, Jacqueline Schrader was a great asset to our county jail here a couple of years ago. She did programs with female inmates in jail and mental health and crisis and other issues. And being on the Community Services Board, we just getting ready to appoint a new member from our office to be on the Community Services Board to represent law enforcement. They are a great board to get a feedback from on how we are dealing with mental health issues. And so we appreciate that partnership, and I thank her for that question.
Okay, and at that point, I don't have any other questions from the Zoom membership, but I will leave this open if there's anybody else on the Zoom call that would like to type in a question in the Q&A section. Please go ahead and do so, and we will circle back around to you if you have any more questions. At this point, we'll turn it over to the audience in-house.
Thank you, Tim. Would anyone in the audience that's present here in the legislative chambers like to ask a question? And if so, I'd ask you to come to the podium and turn on the microphone so that the folks in the room, as well as those in the Zoom audience, can hear the question.
It's on. My name is Diane Lovejoy. I'm a resident of the county and property owner. My question, it dovetails with the breakdown of the arrests between blacks and whites. Of those populations, do you have the statistics as to how many of those or percentage of those two groups are actually incarcerated at the time of arrest? You know, that would be taken for cap arraignments and are arrested and actually put in custody, physical custody.
Yes, we could produce those statistics for you. Many times, under the bail reform, we're required to do an arraignment. There's like 9 or 10 exceptions there, and if we have a whole checklist that deputies fill out, and if any one of those answers is yes to those checklists, then say, as an example, say the arrest was domestic violence related and we're looking for an order of protection that might be advisable. And so then we would need to do an arraignment to have the judge issue such a thing. And so oftentimes we do the arraignment. More often than not, the individual is released on their own recognizance or that form of bail.
Thank you. I think based on what they're looking for, it would be helpful for your reporting or what your plan is going to be to show that statistically it isn't a higher percentage of individuals that actually end up incarcerated long-term between racial and other ethnic groups, whether it be whites, Hispanics, non-Hispanics. And that's why I asked the question, if you can do the breakdown on that, and that would be very helpful. My other question, I see you have many different community agencies and boards that you're working with. Has there ever been a formalized group, whether it be a community advisory board, that would formalize that process between each of those individual groups in the sheriff's department, that would show a coordinated way of handling issues of the community type things that they're looking for in this executive order? Would that be helpful to you? And if it isn't, if there's not a need for it, that should probably be addressed in the plan as well, to show that it's been considered and ruled out as a necessity.
So are you talking about a community advisory board?
As opposed to just doing each one separately, have one localized board and have meetings periodically that can address them that way instead of doing a scattergun type of a situation where you're dealing with each one individually? Would it be helpful to have a board of that type? If not, to show that that's been considered and determined not necessary for the county, that I think would be helpful in the plan so that they know you've looked at it, addressed it, and determined that that's not necessarily for the county.
Well, we have a lot of partnerships with a lot of entities, and some are formal, some are not. Sometimes different entities will ask us to participate or want us to be involved. It's like having somebody on the community services board, that type of thing. The CJCC, we have people on that board. I've got contractual relationships with different entities to perform services such as DSS, a contractual relationship to investigate public assistance fraud, that type of thing. There's many agencies we have relationships with that they want to partner with us from time to time. We have a good relationship with the Yates County Penn Yan Airport, the Penn Yan Flying Club. In those groups, we've done training for those groups before, and I get invited periodically to attend the airport council meetings and things like that. So we have a lot of connections that way, and I have a lot of contractual relationships too. But I appreciate your point. We've often thought about doing something more formal with senior citizens and groups like that. They have something in law enforcement called a SALT Council, which is seniors and law enforcement together. That's what it means. We've thought about those types of things, we'll ponder that. I appreciate that, Diane.
I was just thinking perhaps from a community perspective, individuals, if they knew that there was a particular board that they could contact for questions to be answered, that may be of assistance, and that would be helpful to you because it would be a collection point for you. And just one last point, because there are two policing agencies in the county, is there a formalized relationship between the Sheriff's Department and the Village of Penn Yan, or has there been something explored to make sure that when these plans come out that there's similarities or coordination in the types of plan that come out of the two entities so that there isn't a drastic difference between the village and the county?
Well, I can let Chairman Paddock address that as well. I know that it was our intent in the beginning that there be some collaboration. The village chose to go in a different direction, as I recall.
You've summarized it accurately, yes.
We thought that would be a good, we do an awful lot of work together. The agencies work together quite a bit. In fact, we dispatch their units for all the emergency calls and in evenings and overnight as well, and answer their telephones type of thing. During the day, they take care of it themselves. But we talk all the time. One of my concerns has always been that, like the use of force policy, I wanted to make sure that their model policy was off of the New York State policy as well as ours, so that if we end up at the same incident, that
You're
that our
following the same
policies are
guidelines,
very
right?
similar, and those are things that are important. But we get along very well. I have a great relationship with Chief Dunham, and but they decided to do this reform initiative collaboration on their own, and I wasn't asked to be a part of it. So and I know originally Chairman Paddock did have a conversation with the mayor about that, I believe.
I had two conversations with the mayor, and they elected to address this situation independently.
Okay, thank you for addressing that. I just thought it would be important for those on Zoom as well as those here to know whether or not there is any coordination between the two, especially for our clients. If there's going to be differences between the two, they're not necessarily going to know what those differences might be, what to expect from their dealings with the police agency if they have dealings with the sheriff's department primarily, and then something occurs within the village, they're going to probably assume that it's going to be the same as them dealing with the sheriff's department. So perhaps there needs to be, I don't know about publicity, but at least some type of a notification to the public that there are differences in your final plan, you know, if it's going to be published at some point, so that they're aware that there may be differences. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
I appreciate your,
Thank you.
it's a very thorough plan. Very thorough plan, and it certainly looks like you've already addressed many of the issues that need to be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Harper.
Mine's more of a comment. I've been involved in the EMS agency for over 40 years. And I just have to say that whenever I've been out on a call, whether that be a motor vehicle accident, drug-related, intox people, whatever, I generally, the response from the sheriff, Kenyon Police, or New York State Police that are there has always been looking at the favor of the victim. You know, what can they do to help that victim out? They've always been very good, you know, towards the victim, whether it's giving Narcan, whether it's making sure that person is warm if it's a cold winter day, things like that. And I think a lot of that comes from the progressiveness in the accreditation over the years. We're leading in many cases in front of other counties. Some of those counties just got certified, I think, last year, and your initial accreditation was 2005. So, you know, I'm just going to say thank you for what you and the other departments do.
Yep. Well, thank you. I know we share a lot of policies all the time, don't we, Howard? Howard Davis, Undersheriff. He's always sending them to another agency that requests. So we share everything that we have. So thank you.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
I'm Floyd Hoover from Penyan here, a landowner and a property owner, and also a Dresden firefighter. And I do want to thank the Sheriff's Department and Police Department because on accident scenes, I've been involved with them, and I really appreciate their effort to work together and get the job done and to benefit the victim. And also, but I do have a little bit of a question about child services people. Do they have the right to go into a house without a search warrant, or how is that handled, or how should it be handled?
well, you're talking about the Child Protective Unit
Yes.
for the Department of Social Services?
Yes.
Well, oftentimes if they suspect that there could be or they have an investigation on say a hotline call, a child abuse type of call, then they're duty bound to investigate. I would, without knowing all the facts, I would venture to guess that you just can't, you don't have the right to enter a private dwelling without permission, consent to go in. And if you're asked to leave, they have to leave. That applies to us as well. We would have to get an administrative search warrant sometimes to gain access to a premises that we weren't invited to be in there. And so without an invitation or consent, I believe that it could be an issue. Of course, I don't know all the facts, but it could be an issue.
That's what I figured it would be, and thanks for the information.
Okay. Yep. We have meetings with DSS on a regular basis. Had one today, as a matter of fact. Can you play off of that, Lieutenant, one of you, or yeah, Lieutenant Beck? What he's talking about on, because we assist child abuse investigation. We assist that unit often.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, any agency would either need a search warrant or permission. You are free to deny them entry, but with DSS, there would also be other sanctions they could give if they were doing a child protective investigation and you were not cooperating with the investigation. But ultimately, you would have to have permission or a search warrant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unless there's some exigent circumstance where there's, somebody screaming inside the house. Other than that, where we would have to take immediate action to preserve life or property.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Does that answer your question, Mr. Hoover? Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Doug?
I'm Doug Marchand, a senior, born and raised here, Yates County resident, property owner. I'd like to first make a comment that I've had several involvements with the Sheriff's Department, from active shooter training to airport to flying club. General questions. I have never gone to the Sheriff's office and not received an answer to the question. Sometimes maybe you don't like the answer, but I've always received an answer. I found the community interaction to be exceptional. I wouldn't have a recommendation that I can present what I would change if I was Sheriff Spike. What I like about it is we have one man that they all have to answer to. Now I'll come to my question. I've been following the stuff in Geneva fairly closely. Is there any chance that the discipline that would be whatever cause or whatever need would be outside the handling of the administration of the existing sheriff's office?
No, the answer is no to that because the Office of Sheriff is considered a co-employer for all terms and conditions of employment. The case in Geneva, the chief of police and the chief of police in most cities and villages is not considered the co-employer. The appointing authority is not the chief of police. The appointing authority is actually the village board, if you will. And in towns, it's a town board. They are the appointing authority, and then so forth. Where the Office of Sheriff, there's autonomy there where the sheriff is the appointing authority when it comes to that, and it comes to discipline, and that's the final say.
That's what I wanted to know. Because in any, whether it's a school, a family, or whatever, you need this, the buck stops one place and everybody needs to know it stops one place. And I want to make sure through all of this statewide stuff, we're not going to waver from where our discipline is meted out. That's all I have. Thank you.
Sheriff, if I could follow up on that, if there were something criminal, because those are some of the or some of the situations in Geneva, if there were something criminal, you would either turn over an investigation to the state police or some other agency, or appropriately charge an individual should something like that occur, correct?
Yes, it may be appropriate to have another agency investigate something. That's entirely possible. A lot of times we work with the district attorney on that, or depending upon what it is, you would have to get the attorney general involved, perhaps. Right now, anytime in New York State that there's a police shooting death, all right, say a police officer takes the life of someone else by using that deadly physical force, it's investigated by the New York State Attorney General office. The district attorney is cut right out of the program, and they investigate it and they also prosecute it. And that's a law that just came out not too long ago.
Sorry, Doug, but if you don't have it on the
Doug-
microphone, everybody
Doug
can't hear.
Marchand, the senior again. I don't want to mix up my comment because I said discipline.
Okay.
A criminal investigation, if an officer does something, I would understand the first thing our sheriff's department needs to do is get it investigated outside. I was talking about a routine civilian complaint, disciplinary problems, how they will be handled. It has nothing to do with a criminal complaint, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Terry Button.
Terry Button, Yates County Legislature, landowner, resident. I just wanted to dovetail on Mr. Harper's comments. I appreciate, Dick, what you said. I think, Sheriff, at the end, the public has a responsibility to law enforcement and the rest of the public of respect. Our county sheriff's department, corrections officers give us respect. The public needs to be held to the same accountable at times and give respect to law enforcement because sometimes that fails. And as officers start every day, they don't have the ability to look into a crystal ball and see poor human behavior coming down the pike that makes a difference someday in what goes on. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Seeing none further on Zoom, correct, Tim?
I've opened up the mics on Zoom. If there's any further questions from people that may have not been able to get a question in the Q&A, please go ahead now with your question. Okay, hearing none, I would say that was it.
Well, again, I would thank everyone for their participation. Surveys are available online. There are also hard copies of surveys outside the door on the table. You can take one and either mail it back or somehow return it to Connie Hayes in our legislative office. She will also have copies that folks can pick up there if they want to fill out a hard copy and return that. Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, Tim, for administering this, and thank everyone for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you. And this, hang on a second.
Zoom.